We've been missing you. Do you want to find the witch friends you've been missing? Do you want to participate in these conversations live? And do you want to support the work of recovering a true history of feminist ideas about magic? Do you want to hang out? Do you want an invite to Zoom together with Amy and myself every new moon, along with our hilarious, diverse, wise, queer, creative, anti-racist, science, and awe-loving coven? You must join the Missing Witches Patreon. It's pay what you can, and we can't wait to meet you there. Patreon.com/missingwitches.
You aren't being a proper woman, therefore you must be a witch. 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 You must be a witch.
Welcome, listeners. Welcome, witches. Welcome, friends. Welcome, whatever the weather is, wherever you are. I'm looking out the window. It's been a wild weekend of wind. We came home from a weekend away, and there were the footprints of wild geese, all sheltered on one side of, not wild geese, wild turkeys, all sheltered on one side of our house. And then this morning, as I was preparing for this conversation, I watched a little flock of fat wild turkeys walk by on the lake, leaving their little triangle imprints across, and it felt like a friendly visitation and also a reminder of how rough this season is and how we need to stick together. I know for many of our listeners and friends and coven mates, this season has been a struggle. I mean, this is a time of celebration and also a time of loss, trying to find who we can rely on, getting frustrated by the world, in my own family, seeing people who don't have a lot get pushed aside and struggling to not just react with anger at how that's happening, but just be there for the people who are getting shuffled about. I don't know. I'm struggling with all that. I don't know where you are, but welcome home to here, to the coven we make between our ears. Let's talk about the magic of craft and the sacredness of making. Let's talk about gems and gem stories and gem lore. And let's hear from a witch who brings this true love and attention to making these beautiful family heirloom objects and how she thinks about it. It's Christmas time. It's Yule time. Let's talk about sparkly, beautiful things. Welcome to the podcast, Michelle Pajak-Reynolds. How are you? Can you tell us a bit about your work, how this season is treating you?
So my work, I've been making my work since I was 5 years old. That's my earliest memory of being an artist and a jeweler. And actually jewelry is how I got to be in this world to begin with, because my parents met across a jewelry case. My mom was a jewelry department manager at a store here just outside of Cleveland, Ohio. And my dad was a Cleveland Clinic police officer. So many people around the world may know of the Cleveland Clinic hospital system. So I live about 45 minutes from Cleveland, Ohio. And when I was little, my dad was an officer there. And like many officers in their off-duty hours would work local loss prevention jobs. So he, picked up, just some extra hours here and there. And that's how my parents met. And they got married and had me shortly after that. So jewelry is how I got to be here to begin with. So, but as far as working in precious metals and gems, that didn't start until high school. And prior to that, I was using babysitting money to buy stones and beads and stuff from my local craft store, and would just, make things and make things for myself and my girlfriends. But at 5 years old, I was really inspired by the live action TV show Wonder Woman with the actress Linda Carter in it. Because who doesn't want power bracelets and magical tiaras and like a golden lasso of truth that could get bad guys, to tell their secrets and everything. So jewelry that gives you superpowers, is how I got started. But I was very lucky. My high school, so I graduated high school in 1995. So this is when vocational programs still existed at the high school level here in the States. My high school had a jewelry class. And so I got to work in a jewelry studio in the 10th grade and start working with silver and enamels and a little bit of gemstones, but mostly like silver work and how to work with the silver and the materials. And then since I had to put myself through college, Kent State University, which was a school that I could drive to from my parents' house because they could support me by allowing me to live at home for free. I commuted back and forth to Kent State for the fashion and jewelry program and got my degree from that program in 2001 and started my business shortly after that.
You mentioned that one of your early experiences was learning to work with silver. How do you think about precious metal work these days? It's complicated.
Well, as with all relationships, especially long-term ones that we humans have with things, every relationship is complicated. I worked with silver and now I'm working in Fairmine gold. Humans have worked with metals, for millennia. I mean, we have whole huge sections of history like the Bronze Age and all of that. So, we've worked with these materials. We've been mining these materials for a long, long time. So my relationship with the materials is one where, like, what's the best material for the story I'm trying to tell through a collection of jewelry? Each collection I make, it has a backstory and it has an inspiration to it. And I don't just make things to make them pretty. Like, yes, they have to be aesthetically pleasing. Of course, they have to look good and they have to hold up. But I'm really interested in exploring, like right now, the past few years, I've been interested in exploring the lore between stones and like how various cultures around the world have related to certain stones and used them, and the stories we tell about them and the stories that get passed down about them. So I think about them as sometimes almost as like time travel on my workbench, because some of these stones take hundreds of thousands of years to form deep in the earth. And, a gemstone miner somewhere in the world found them and, brought them to light. And now here they are on my workbench. And they're part of telling a specific story for a collection. So I think about them, differently as time has gone on, and especially the past couple of years, as I've deepened my research in gemology, like prior to my daughter being born. And my daughter's now almost 6.5, going on 30, but and but prior to that, I didn't give much thought to the raw materials. It was just like, well, what's going to fit for what I'm going to make? And then I would have to go hunt it down. And now that, when she was about 2.5, her two favorite questions are, who made it and how did it get here? Like, she didn't ask why, like the way other kids do. And so there was a moment in the studio. There's actually a little clip in the highlights reel on my Instagram from one of my Instagram stories. So the highlights reel is the title of that collection is In the Studio. There's this little blip of her. It's the very first video of her just being in awe of what's on my workbench and talking about how pretty it is and how there's so many of it and like all this stuff. But the part of the conversation that, of course, I turned my phone off because she was getting into things was, who made it? How did it get here? And I gave her, because I'm puttering around in the studio. And so, like typical parent who is busy, you kind of give like the answer that you think is going to pacify the kid. And she's like, no, mama, I don't think so. Tell me who. Like, she wanted specifics. And I realized in that moment, like, oh shit, I couldn't tell her who found this stone or who, turned this silver ingot into wire for me to work with. And so that began a commitment to, well, I need to know. And so I started looking into more of, ethical sourcing and fair trade, fair mind. And it's really changed how I relate to the materials. Like right now, I'm reading a report out of that was put out by the organization for what was it called? I have it in my notes because they go by. It was the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development about gold flows out of Venezuela, because there's a lot of illicit gold trading going on, and so like I'm learning about how these raw materials move around the world. Like we've all been talking supply chain for the past 2 years because of COVID stuff. And the supply chain for raw materials, especially as we increase our demand for like green energy, the demand for gold is going to increase because gold is needed to plate the microchips because gold doesn't conduct heat the way other materials do. Or like lithium for rechargeable batteries in electric vehicles and other devices. Like, if you can't grow it, you have to mine it. So our relationship with mining these materials is going to change as we move to a greener economy, so to speak. And the jewelry component of, the gold supply chain is part of that.
Yeah, I think like many witches, we've all been struggling to figure out where, to have a healthier relationship with the materials we use, the ancestors that we're working with. I think it's okay that we started a little bit naive, just sort of grabbing crystals that we were excited about at a gem show or like an esoteric shop near us. But, we're growing up and trying to be better stewards and understand the dynamics of how these things are coming to us. Yeah. I'm also pausing to read this question. It is interesting to think about a reciprocal relationship with our materials for sure, as is kind of coming up in the chat. I wonder how you think about the way that the power of those materials, the stories in them, the magic is impacted by what you learn about their origin.
Well, a lot of what a lot of people don't realize, like one of the terms, like since we were talking about gold, one of the terms that's a big buzzword as consumers demand more traceability in their products is recycled gold. And the truth of the matter is the vast majority of the gold that's in the marketplace now is all the gold that's ever been mined in the world since human beings started mining it and extracting it. So it's been recycled a lot already. The issue with recycled gold, and this is something that I learned in becoming a Fairmine licensed designer. So Fairmine Gold is about changing the mining sector, and it's about artisanal small scale mining and traceability. So recycled gold, you don't know the origin necessarily of the gold. And so that can be a challenge because you don't know if it's coming, where it's coming from, how it was sourced, was, the best environmental practices used, all of those things. With fair mine, the miners who go through the fair mine licensing process have to abide by all these regulations and requirements of the certification. And a lot of that's overseen by the Alliance for Responsible Mining. But the issue is it comes down to supply and demand. Only 33% of the gold available in the marketplace right now is recycled gold. 1% of the gold available in the marketplace is fair mine gold. So we're not going to ever stop mining gold. It's just a matter of how it's done. Here in the US, fair mine gold's only been in the market, available in the market since 2014. So we're only talking 7 years. And it takes a long time to build consumer awareness about it, demand for it, all of those things. So the way I think about the gold that I'm interested in working with is like, I see the miners, whether they're the precious metal miners or like the gemstone miners, I see their hands as an extension of my hands. And like, I can't make my work without them doing their work. And how they go about it, like knowing that what I'm buying is supporting them in their communities. Because many parts of the world where artisanal small scale mining is going on it's remote, it's rural, opportunities are very limited. Many of these miners are also farmers part of the year. So this is additional income for them and stability for their communities. And also, if they're not able to protect their land, you're going to have illegal and illicit mining move in. And that's another challenge to address with it. So it's complicated and it's messy. And, there's no perfect solution. Like I just attended the Chicago Responsible Jewelry Conference a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking, one of the presenters was talking about how there's 45 different like certification programs that are trying to tackle traceability issues within the gold and gemstone trade. None of them are perfect, but they're all a step in the right direction.
Yeah, that's sort of what I was going to ask next, was if there are similar certifications or processes for crystals or gems, but it sounds like there's so many. Like it's as multifaceted as the stones themselves, people trying to figure out how to do this right.
Yeah, it's and a lot of it comes down to what is the marketplace going to support. As with anything, you vote with your wallet. So years ago in the 90s, you had for diamonds the Kimberley process come out, which was about certifying that diamonds were conflict free. Well, the Kimberley process is limited in scope to just ensuring that it's not funding conflict. That's not saying that there isn't child labor, there isn't forced labor, there isn't all these other potential things going on. The issue, as someone just put in the chat about 3D printed diamonds, there aren't 3D printed diamonds. You're talking about like lab created diamonds. So lab created diamonds, there's two processes for that. It's high pressure, high temperature. So you're basically replicating the natural processes deep in the earth, except you're doing it in the lab. And one of the other ways of creating lab created diamonds is through carbon vapor deposition, so CVD. And though that technology has been around since like the 1950s, it wasn't until recently that those diamonds, the technology improved to create jewelry grade diamonds. So the issue is lab created stones use massive amounts of electricity,
right,
to replicate those natural forces. And so where is that electricity coming from? And that is a challenge. A lot of lab grown diamonds are produced in China right now. And we know China doesn't have the best environmental standards. And so it's kind of the Wild West right now for lab created diamonds. There were a lot of claims of lab created diamonds being a more sustainable source, a more ethical source. Well, here in the US, the Federal Trade Commission said, oh, no, hold up. Like, you can't make those claims because you can't claim something you can't prove.
right.
And like, same with when I make a claim about the sourcing of my stones. So like, I just purchased for my upcoming collection, I just purchased all these beautiful, fully traceable rough sapphires through Moyo Gems. So you were talking about like traceability for stones. So Moyo is fully traceable. I can tell you the miners' names who mine the stones that are going to be in my collection. And what Moyo is doing is supporting predominantly female miners. There are a few male miners who are part of the cooperatives and stuff in Tanzania, but it's supporting them and enabling them to bring the stones to market. And many of them are mining, on their own land. Tanzania is rich in minerals and gemstones, and the Tanzanian government wants things to go through the proper channels, as opposed to, you hear, if you're hearing about stones, coming from Madagascar, Madagascar, there's not a lot of, I'm trying to find the right word. There's not a lot of traceability going on in Madagascar. There's a lot of conflict. There's a lot of illegal mining going on. And so what's happening there is, you could be funding child labor. You can be funding, military owning a mine. So, but Madagascar knows, because people are labeling stones in the marketplace as Madagascar, stones. Well, these didn't go through, the proper customs channels.
Right.
So traceability is a big issue. And so what I have shifted to is either, if I can't mine it myself, like I did for the stones in my Mira collection, then I'm only going to work with the gemstone dealers and the gemstone miners that I know personally. And I can tell you, to go back to my daughter's question, who made it and how did it get here? I'm accountable for answering that now.
It's is it kind of akin to the movement in like coffee and cotton, away from what's been called fair trade and toward direct trade?
Yeah, it's similar to that. So there is a movement, for fair trade, fair mined stones. It's along those same lines, because if like I can go to my grocery store and pick a certain brand of tuna off the shelf, and it says, type in this barcode and we could tell you which ship this can of tuna came from. We should be able to do that on some level with gemstones, like something far more, lasting than than a can of tuna. And so that's starting to happen. A lot of that's because of blockchain technology, which is I don't understand blockchain technology, but as far as that, like, you can't within the blockchain, you can't edit. Nobody else can change it or mess with it. Like, I'm still learning all that stuff. So a lot of it's come down to technology and also just people's ability to connect in ways we weren't able to before. When COVID happened, my friends, Monica Stevenson, who's the founder of Anza Gems, who also helped create the Moyo Gems, Tanzanian miners, because we could do it online as opposed to her being able to go there. Years ago that
Michelle, you cut out for a second, and you cut out just when you were saying the origin of that company and what it does.
Oh, okay. So Moyo Gems and Anza Gems were founded by my friend Monica Stevenson. And so what Moyo is doing is empowering female miners and in the Tanzania's Tanga region. And so the connectivity that we're able to have, because she couldn't travel there because of COVID, she would go there a couple times a year and buy direct from the miners, because you look through hundreds of thousands of stones to then decide which one you're going to buy, because it has to be marketable. It has to be financially viable. And so what she's doing is the miners that are mining the stones in Tanzania, they're getting far more money from her for their stones than going through the channels that existed before. So often it would be like a broker who would, and then the miner would only get a tiny portion of the money for their stones. So this is changing that. And also because she is, tracing who mined it and ensuring that it was mined responsibly through the partnerships that she has with the Tanzanian government and everything, that I can tell you who mined the stones that are going to be in my next collection. I can tell you every single stone and every single piece. And as far as the fair mine gold that's going to be in these pieces, I can tell you through my supplier that it's come from one of two gold mines in the world, because of where they source fair mine gold from. So it becomes this very tangled web after a while. But it's exciting to work with these materials, because I now know and can provide people with that information. And when I tell people what I'm working with, like, they're like, you can do that now? I'm like, yeah, I can do that now. Like, we're at that stage. We have a long way to go, but we're at that. This is the stage we're at in the game.
It kind of brings, I want to talk about gem lore. You brought it up earlier. And I've been thinking about how much the stories we tell give these objects power. You look at the history of diamonds. Diamonds have done such a good job of marketing themselves, marketing the rarity of diamonds, when really, if I understand correctly, most other gemstones are much more rare and harder to get at than diamonds. They just did a great job of sort of telling a story, marketing a story around engagement and whatever. But so, which is, I think, something as witches we're really comfortable with, that our stories give objects power, and then objects give the stories power, and it's a relationship. And you are part right now of writing a new story, like investing a new story with magic and being able to know the names and the traceability and see the faces and see the land where these things are coming from and the history. And then you sit with all of that at the bench But then you're also drawing in these mythologies of gems. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so the mythology of gems is actually how I found you and Amy. So when I wanted to deepen my gemology research and knowledge, I had actually thought about getting my graduate gemologist certification, but that would be about another $20,000 to $25,000 in education on top of my bachelor's degree and master's degree I already have. And I'm like, well, I want to know more than what I can just see under a gem braid microscope. I want to know more than just crystal structure and durability and the Mohs scale of hardness, which is like how stones are ranked in their level of durability. So like diamond is the top, and something like, chalk, like sidewalk chalk is at the bottom, and pearls are somewhere in the middle, they're like a 4. So it's that type of stuff. I wanted to know more. I wanted to understand how different cultures relate to different stones. And stones have been written about in all kinds of different sacred texts, like you have in the Abrahamic tradition, especially in like the Old Testament. You have stories of Aaron's breastplate having 12 specific stones to represent the 12 tribes of Israel, which is some of the origins of birthstones, or at least one of the origin stories of birthstones, because every culture has different stories of that. Like in the Quran, you have different levels of heaven being associated with different gemstones. You have all these different tales, but not just in sacred text. You also have, different novels that have connected certain characters to certain stones. You have different, like in Greek and Roman times, quartz crystals were dipped in cold water and put on wounds as ice packs because the stone would get cold. So you have what has the stories that have survived history. There's a connection to stones and crystals. Everything that makes our modern life what it is connected to stones and crystals. It's just in a form that we don't easily recognize it. So like, for example, if you have drywall in your home, that material is the industrial grade version of selenite. And we call that industrial grade version of selenite gypsum. So it's gypsum drywall. So you can walk into any home improvement store and buy sheets of gypsum drywall. Selenite in its finest form is alabaster. So alabaster, one of the sacred uses of alabaster was in the Coptic jars in Egypt, like that would have, like when pharaohs were mummified, their organs were put in those alabaster jars. But even in the New Testament, you have the story of the woman with the alabaster jar. The alabaster jar held all this perfume that she anointed and washed Jesus's feet with. It's all selenite, just in different forms or different quality levels, and we give it different names. If you have copper pipes in your house, copper is metal, it had to be mined. There's one of the comments was, my house is a gemstone. Yes, your house is a gemstone. And it's all around you. The technology that makes this conversation possible, there's gold in the computer technology. The microchips are coated with gold. LCD screens is liquid crystal. I think it's liquid crystal diode or something. But even like quartz, in the time where watches were worn much more than when we had our smartphones, But if you're a watch collector, a quartz movement, quartz is used in high-level timekeeping devices. It's also used in aeronautics. So if you actually stop and think about it, their gemstones and crystals are all around us. The periodic table of elements makes up the whole world. All of those in various combinations make gemstones and crystals.
Yeah, this is the stuff that blows my mind, that I can go down tunnels about forever. Like the very minerals of life, like the place where life happens, where electricity moves through things, where things converge. There's a fundamental material there. Do you think about that when you're at your bench? You've described your work as a sacred craft or as a sacred experience?
Yeah, I do think about it. And I didn't realize how sacred my creative practice was until I became a mom and I didn't have any free time anymore. And just how critical having time at the bench and time at the studio was. Like, even if I got 15 minutes, like when I was on, maternity leave, when my daughter was first born, and not sleeping and barely being able to shower on a regular basis because the days of breastfeeding a newborn are insane, let alone having the energy to create anything but sustaining this little, voracious eater. Yeah. I realized then just how sacred it was. And then when COVID hit and I had to add at-home preschool teacher to my resume, just how critical my art is. Like, it's the through line for my whole life. But as far as like the stones and what I think about at the bench, like, some days the ideas I have for collections, like this collection I'm working on right now, it's an idea that has gripped me for a couple years. And being able to research it. And some of the designs that I'm working on right now are coming through as if I'm taking dictation. And there's other days where it's just work. And then there's some days where it's just like a fucking slog. Like, it's a grind. Like, it's just not coming together and you're just pushing through it. And it's all there. But like we were talking about diamonds, and before, diamonds are pure carbon, and we are carbon-based life forms. Diamonds, when you think about how they're born, and I should back up a little bit. What we now understand about geology and gemology, we know that diamonds are born deep in the belly of volcanoes. And it takes the force and the pressure of a volcano to create a diamond. So everywhere where there is an active volcano right now, millennia from now, future humans will be able to mine diamonds there once that volcano is completely extinct. Any other gemstone found in the world is a treasure hunter getting lucky. So we know now, like where copper's found, you will probably find malachite and azurite, because those two minerals and crystals have copper in them. And like malachite was often ground up into powder to make various cosmetics in Egypt. Same with lapis. So not only are our homes potentially gemstones, but when you look at ancient artworks that have like that ultramarine blue look to them, that's ground up lapis. So you're looking at gemstones in liquid form. A famous painting like the Dutch masters, like Vermeer's Girl with a Pearl Earring, that blue in her head scarf piece, that is lapis. And if you're looking for a cozy afternoon on the couch, the movie Girl with a Pearl Earring with Scarlett Johansson in it, there's this beautiful scene of her. I can't think of the actor who played Vermeer, but Scarlett Johansson portrays, the character, and it's a historical fiction piece, but portrays the character who becomes the model for Girl with a Pearl Earring. And there's a scene in there where it shows the two of them sitting next to each other in his studio, grinding different compounds to make their own paints. So I think about all those things when I'm at the bench. I think about what are all the various forms and what are the stories that have been connected to some of these stones. And like the sapphires I'm working with right now, I'm looking at all the stories and all the legends of sapphires, from like alchemical use to different, like what different sacred texts have to say about them, how they've been worn and regarded, and even some of the mistranslations in these sacred texts, because all blue stones, millennia ago were called sapphire, but they're very different. So like, I think about all of that. Does that mean it all ends up in the work? Not necessarily. But those are the things that rattle through my head as I'm working at my bench.
Can you tell us some of the sapphire stories?
Yes. So one of the stories is that the 10 Commandments were written on, so one of the supposed mistranslations of scripture from that time is that Moses brought the 10 Commandments down from Mount Sinai on sapphire tablets. Well, sapphire is the mineral corundum. So corundum. It's one of the hardest minerals, second only to like diamonds. So the technology didn't exist in that time period that we're aware of to be able to carve into sapphire. However, in that part of the world, lapis is abundant. Some of the finest grade lapis comes out of Afghanistan. And in one of the stories is, Moses dropped the tablets and they cracked. Well, if you dropped sapphire, it's not going to crack because it's one of the hardest materials on earth. However, lapis is softer. So it is entirely possible that those tablets were actually lapis. And given how they're written about as having like gold flecks in them, sapphire doesn't have that. Lapis has that. So that's one of the stories. Also different within the Roman Catholic Church. I believe it's the Pope and maybe bishops too, or cardinals. I know it's certain individuals within the hierarchy of the Roman Catholic Church. When they're ordained into that role, they're given a sapphire ring because the blue of sapphire is associated with the blue of heaven and divinity. So one of the other stories that I read, it was a book by a medium and an astrologer, Barbara Handclough, and she was talking about the Pleiades and how the Pleiades communicate with our planet through sapphires. Do I believe all of that? No, but I'm fascinated by it. Like, I'm fascinated by our connection to those things. And just like how I was talking about, the various grades of selenite before, sapphire has a huge range of colors. It's not just blue. But sapphires, when they are a deep pink, almost red, and even into the reds, we call those rubies, because corundum is the same mineral as rubies. So even stones, when they get into different color ranges, and there's one I just posted, it's still considered a sapphire because it's not deep enough to be a ruby, but I just posted a beautiful on my Instagram, a video of a beautiful deep ruby pink rough sapphire that when I was shopping for the sapphires through Moyo Gems, my daughter was looking over my shoulder and of course picked out a few for herself. So that one's for her. With everything going on, I don't know if I'll have it ready for her in time for a Christmas present. So it might wait till her birthday this coming summer, but you can see that deep pink. If it was more red, it'd be called a ruby, but it's the same mineral, corundum. And so we call these things, we give different things different names, or we give different colors of certain stones different names. But they're still, when you get down to the mineral level, they're the same mineral. So I find it all like fascinating, and it becomes this big, like melting pot, crock pot soup thing in my head. And it all just kind of swirls around in there as I'm like listening to podcasts like yours in the studio. Because that's how I found, like I said, that's how I found you and Amy. I wanted to find out more about the stones and the lore and the legends, and it popped up in like an Instagram algorithm thing, like in the scroll, and I was like, wait, what is this? Tell me more. What is this? and so that's how I found you guys. And that's led me down different paths of researching lore and how different, since you cover so many artists in your show and in your books, like how they've used their raw materials and where they've gone to in their research and their work in more fairness and traceability with things, even though they may not have been using that language at that time.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's just a ramble and a tangent.
That's what we're all about. Since you mentioned using these materials, using them for color therapy, using them for magic, using them, from the perspective of the person who ends up with one of your pieces. How do you think about how these objects go out and have a life of their own and get used? And do you think the shape of them affects how they can be used? Do you think, and also I want to talk about geometry, but I'm going to just slip it in now and then we'll circle back to it.
Yeah, so shape, I will definitely say in jewelry design, shape is important because I have to be able to set a stone in a design so that it will survive and last through multiple generations of wear and love and use. So when I create something, I'm not just thinking about how is it going to, hold up today, but also, like, we all know the story of like great grandma's ring being passed down through multiple generations. And how we were talking about how I think about working in silver and gold, like those materials, like, could I make jewelry in cheaper materials? Sure. Are those materials going to last and hold up across multiple generations? Not necessarily. So the shape of stones matters because certain shapes I can set in a way so the stone is protected. Certain stones, like if they're too fibrous looking, like they'd be great as a specimen in a collection, but they would never survive in a piece of jewelry, just given what a piece of jewelry goes through. And I'm drawn to shapes. Like if you look at my website, I don't do anything with sharp angles. I don't find them enjoyable to wear myself. Could I make a piece with sharp angles? Sure. I will more than happily make a piece with sharp angles if you want to custom order. But as far as something that I would do on my own for a collection, I don't foresee myself doing that. I like working with the raw stones, or like I've worked with geode slices and petite geode pairs, because it's the closest I can get to the moment of discovery, like that, the miner's moment of discovery. And I like working with the Herkimer diamond crystals that I mined myself a couple years ago, because those stones, the way they form, they're naturally faceted. So I can work with them and set them in a similar way that I would set a faceted stone, but nature did the faceting.
That's so interesting. I hadn't thought of, is that, do you think the sort of primary defining factor in why gems are cut the way they are is so that they can be set safely? Or is it sort of that in relationship with the crystal structure or amorphous structure of the material itself?
It's all the above.
Yeah.
And when it comes to translucent stones, or transparent stones like diamonds, and even colored stones like sapphires and rubies, what you're doing in cutting the stone. So what the lapidary artist is doing is they're not only working with the mineral and the crystalline structure, they're also working with light, because how the light bounces around in the stone is what gives it its sparkle, and it enhances the beauty. So there's that factor also in how it's cut. You can't have a certain, you can't have a stone be too thin. You can't, like, it's got to be cut. Like, there's a reason why, like, the round, brilliant cut for a diamond is so popular, because it maximizes the light and the sparkle in the stone. So it all depends on the stone and mineral. Some stones, like carnelian, which is a beautiful stone, is beautiful just as a smooth cabochon. So it's not going to have facets. Or like turquoise, you're not really going to see turquoise faceted because it's an opaque stone. So it really depends on the stone and the crystal. My philosophy when it comes to, if people are using stones for metaphysical practice, is go with what resonates with you and with what you're drawn to. Go with what you connect with. And depending on like your budget, like, you don't need to go out and buy expensive stones and crystals. Like, a stone has power if you decide it has power. So if it's a stone you find on a walk in the woods, or on the beach, then that's a special magical stone. Like, it doesn't need to be a selenite wand, or a perfect like crystal point. Like, you don't need that necessarily.
I think that's the exact quote. How we found each other, right, Michelle? It was there was a Cunningham quote about the power of stones washed up on the beach having the same power as expensive crystals. That was like one, I think, like the fourth thing we ever shared on Instagram or something, that because we were like, this is touchstone for us, this is core for us, is anti-capitalist magic. And the individual power in recognizing that you resonate with something. And I think it's so funny, every time we have a coven meeting, we all end up saying, I really resonate with that. I really resonate with that. And you can feel the like sort of wave going around the circle as everyone is identifying things that make them resonate. Why do you think some people connect with some stones?
It's personal and cultural preference, really. Different, just like how different colors, we talked about color therapy a little bit ago, or alluded to it. Just like how different colors mean different things in various cultures. Different shapes mean different things in various cultures as well. And like I said, I'm drawn to more amorphous shapes. I'm drawn to like ovals and teardrops. And one of the signature things I do in my collections is I've done a lot of like gemstone clusters with gems or pearls set on little pins, precious metal pins. So it really comes down to, the same reason why do some people have blue as their favorite color or green as their favorite color? Like it's so individualistic. And I would say when it comes to the shape of a stone, like what feels good in your hand is going to feel different in my hand, or what feels good on your body as a pendant or as earrings or as a bracelet is going to feel different and maybe not good on my body. So like everybody is so different with it.
Yeah. I think about that with parenting. The advice to really pay attention to what your kids are craving. There was a while there where my kid just wanted to eat like avocado and coconut oil, and and she was just like drawn to such strange things. And I think I still don't know if this is right, but I had a feeling like, oh, this is a vegan kid due to her allergies. And we hadn't really been paying attention to omega-3s. And I'm seeing her just like kind of manic 2-year-old craving for certain things that I think are healthy fats. And when we were able to increase those things, like her mood sort of seemed to adjust. And I mean, you can't tell anything with a 2-year-old, like that could have just been a fucking day she was having. But I do think listening to what Michelle's shaking her head. I do just think like there's a lot to be gained in listening to like what my skin wants, what my body wants, and what stones I want to pick up and have around me.
Yeah, I totally agree with it. And like, every day it's different. Like today when I was preparing for this, I was like, well, what do I want to have, around me, and what did I want to talk about? And this necklace I have on, move my wire for my earbud. So, we're talking about stones that, could just be something you pick up in the woods. So this stone here and this is a piece I haven't worn in a long time. I made it, I think, over a decade ago, at least. Yeah, at least, because it was way before I was pregnant with Meg. So, and this stone was given to me by my husband's grandfather. And he was a very spiritual man. He was a devout Pentecostal. And he would often say how God would talk to him. And he said, this particular stone, and I can tell by the red shades in it that it has a lot of iron in it.
Clicking.
And it's about the size of a squished plum. I'm going to take it off and see if I can make it bigger. But anyway, he, when he was walking the land when he was getting ready to build his home, he built a little ranch house for my husband's grandmother. And he said when he was walking the land, deciding which trees to clear, he had picked up this stone, and this had been his worry stone for decades. And grandpa and grandma grandpa passed in 2016. So a month before he passed, he and grandma were married 61 years. So this stone is at least that old. So I got it when he maybe had it for 50 years. And he said one day we were over there visiting him, and he said, he puts the stone in my hand, and he said, he told me the story of the stone that I just told you. And he said, God told me to give it to you because you could do something real pretty with it. And he said, so it's yours. And I was like, oh, no pressure. And so I set it in a piece of darkened silver to look like a hand, as if, like how you would hold the stone in your hand if you had found it. And then since he was talking about clearing trees, I had all these wood beads and I put 24 karat gold leaf on the edges, and made this piece. And so, when you talk about stones that have got, like, this is my most prized possession as far as a stone goes. The only other stone that I have that I would rank that highly is my wedding set, which was my grandmother's on my mom's side. She became a widow at 35. So this is my only connection to my grandfather on my mother's side. And it's diamonds and gold. But I had my husband have it fully restored as my wedding set. So those are the two things that are special to me as far as like what I wanted to have on my body today. And so when you think about that, and you think about what has magic and has power, it's really jewelry's ability to connect us to other people. Jewelers not only work with metals and stones and light, as I mentioned before, but we also work with, the strange invisible world of emotions. Jewelry is so often given as a love token, whether it's given as romantic love or, say, grandma passing something on to you, while she's still here in physical form, as opposed to inheriting her jewelry box, afterwards, after she's moved to the spirit world. And it gives us connection through time and space. And so those are some of the things that, I think about too. And I see a question about growing crystals. Oh, growing crystals is fun. There's a ton of stuff online for how to grow crystals, but the crystals that you're going to be able to grow at home as like a fun science experiment are not durable enough to be used as jewelry. They're very fragile. My daughter actually got a little crystal growing kit as a gift, and so we made some stuff with it. But yeah, they're super, super fragile, but they're cool. They're cool. And you can Google all kinds of stuff. You can grow crystals with Epsom salt inside washed out eggshells and make your own geodes to teach kids about. So just as a fun, if you've got kids and you need something to do with them over a winter break, crystal growing would be a good thing.
I love that as an answer for the kids to our usual question about what's a ritual or a practice that we can take from you in this season. But how about for the crones in the crowd? What's a ritual you're working with these days, or something that can help us grow in our relationship with these ancestors that you spend so much time with?
I would say, well, I can give you some of my favorite book titles. I hashtag read all the books is my thing. But if you're interested in lore, so, we were talking about Scott Cunningham, and his books are awesome. A lot of the books on crystals and minerals and how people have used them just kind of have like correspondences to, different healing modalities. They don't really get into the why and the what. And so I would recommend books by Nicholas Pearson, because he gets into that. He was just on Pam Grossman's The Witch Wave podcast not too long ago. And so that was a fascinating listen. But some of my favorite books, like if you really want to get into more of the lore, I like, one of my favorites is George Frederick Coons' The Curious Lore of Precious Stones. Coons was a gemologist for Tiffany and Company, and he was a prolific writer. and researcher. And when I looked at a lot of the books on gemstones and crystals, and you look in the bibliography, they all cite him. So I'm like, well, heck with this. I'm just going to go to the source as close as I could, because he wrote, so this book, when did this come out? This one came out in 1913. And it includes, so here's what it says, like on the title page: The Curious Lore of Precious Stones, being a description of their sentiments and folklore, superstitions, symbolism, mysticism, use in medicine, protection, prevention, religion, and divination, crystal gazing, birthstones, lucky stones, and talismans, astral, zodiacal, and planetary. So he covered it all in this. So this is one I highly recommend. I actually got it from a used, an online used book store. And then one of my other favorite ones, if you're interested in like alchemy, with the mineralogy, Gems in Myth, Legend, and Lore by Bruce G. Knuth. And I'll send you all of this so you can link to it. And I can send you links to like Moyo gems and Fairmind and various things for like how we talked about recycled gold versus Fairmind gold, and even the PDF for the article I'm reading on gold flows from Venezuela. But what I like about the Gems in Myth, Legend, and Lore book is each page talks about the crystal system for the various stones, and also if there is a alchemical symbol for them, like an ancient alchemy text. And there's a cool section on like stones mentioned in Shakespeare, like how we talked about how different novels and writing, put different properties on stones, and then how that, because Shakespeare was so huge, like some of the things that he said in his writing became part of the lore of stones, even though he kind of made it up, kind of, because everything's based on something else anyway. So there's all kinds of cool things that just when you start digging into these and then looking in the bibliography, you end up down all these wonderful, sparkly rabbit holes.
Yes, we are witches who love a bibliography. So that's key spell casting from Michelle for this season, is go enjoy poring over a bibliography and maybe find a stone on the ground. Is there anything else you had before we say goodbye and go spin out into our days? Anything else you had in your head or in your heart that you want to kind of pour out into this moment?
Well, I will say, I know we've hinted at, maybe once the world is safe for all of us to gather in person, I will kind of just put out there as like some useful information. So, when I sent little May her birthday treasures, I Google mapped how long would it take for me to drive from your house or from my house to your house. And it's about 10 hours. And conveniently situated in the middle is the Ace of Diamonds mine in Herkimer, New York, where I went mining for Herkimer diamond quartz crystals. So I'm just going to put that out there, that perhaps in the hopefully not too distant future, since that's kind of the midpoint between our two creative spaces, that perhaps a group of us can gather there and I can show you how to mine Herkimer quartz crystals, and there is a comment in the chat about the Montana sapphires. Yes, Montana sapphires are amazing. If you're looking for some phenomenal Montana sapphires, my friends at Columbia Gem House, who also do tons of fair trade and ethical sourcing with their gems, and they cut everything on site. They have a beautiful selection of Montana sapphires. So if you just want to go look at them, I would highly recommend that. But I can send you the link for anybody who's interested in a potential future Herkimer diamond quartz crystal mining adventure. I can send you the link for the blog post I wrote about what it was like mining those stones that then became the Mira collection. But there's campgrounds nearby. We could have a whole group of us and roast some marshmallows and find sparkly stones and just have some good old fun time.
Make a great crystal circle in the wilderness. Put it on your list for the great Finding Witches, Missing Witches road trip of the future. I love the idea. Amy and I have an elaborate dream of hitting the road and like a string of fine jewels and strange stones sort of stringing together, opportunities to sit with all of the incredible, inspiring people we've met doing this project, trying to educate ourselves about the things that we find interesting and the knowledges we've been missing and the relationships we've been missing. So let's tuck that away like a precious stone in our hearts and see if, at least in imagining it and writing lore about it, we can get closer to it being true. Thank you for being here. Thank you for doing the work that you do to answer those questions that all of our kids will ask us. How was it made and who made it? And how are we connected to each other? And that's it, I think, for today.
Yeah, and if anybody, I know anybody listening to this who couldn't join in live, if they've got questions, they can DM me, they can drop it in comments on Patreon. Like, you can find me through my website, michellepajak-reynolds.com. Just reach out. We can talk sparkles all day.
Let's talk sparkles all day. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for being here. Bless if I can be.
You must be a witch.
The Missing Witches podcast is brought to you by the Missing Witches Coven. Join us right now on patreon.com/missingwitches. Bless if I can be.